From the moment he was first introduced, Grimmjow has had something to prove. And it's this need, this drive that has fueled his every appearance and what has led to him being one of my favorite characters in Bleach. And this almost primal instinct to be the strongest, to prove himself, has all come to a climactic head in these chapters. And we finally see a bit of where Grimmjow comes from, what he's been through, and why he seems to carry such a heavy chip on his shoulder. One of the best things about Grimmjow is that he's a wild card. He's the kind of antagonist where you just have no idea what he's going to do next, and neither do the other characters in the story. From literally his first scene, he's proven to be a rebel who refuses to listen to anyone or to adhere to any kind of authority. The first thing we ever saw him do was go on an unsanctioned mission without Aizen's permission, and the next time he showed up, he immediately ditched his allies to try to fight Ichigo again. And now he betrays his own team and frees Orihime from her cell, all completely for his own ends and without anyone's approval, because that's just how our boy is. He's doing his own thing. To hell with anyone telling him otherwise. And the whole scene where he broke Orihime out painted him in an almost twisted anti-hero kind of light for a second, taking down the two Arankar women that were sadistically beating up Orihime. Literally every panel they'd been in up until this point showed them as jealous, resentful lunatics, so I didn't exactly feel sorry for them when Grimmjow gave them a taste of their own medicine. It was kind of karma, really. Grimmjow helping to free Orihime was such a great, confusing moment at first, but it's true that he's owed her for restoring his arm. But I love that it isn't really about that. It's not about honor or mercy or kindness. It's really just that he needs her for what he actually has planned. Because when it comes down to it, despite his disobedience, his rebelliousness, and his unpredictability, Grimmjow is a very simple creature. He just wants to fight Ichigo and kill him, but he doesn't want a handicap. He wants to beat Ichigo at his best, so he needs Orihime to heal Ichigo. He's completely willing to throw away Aizen's plan if it means getting a chance to actually fight Ichigo, which is remarkably fascinating while also being remarkably uncomplicated. He just wants to fight his rival at his strongest, and it's exactly what Ichigo wants later too, which I love. It admittedly gave me the same stress I felt as a kid when Goku asked for his friends to give Cell a senzu bean. There's a mutual respect and a mutual desire to beat the other one fair and square. These two characters are actually very similar in a lot of ways, which makes Grimmjow the perfect character to be a recurring rival for Ichigo, to push him into continuing to grow and to break his limits, all while also being really entertaining. But before the fight can really begin, Grimmjow has to deal with Ukiura, who isn't at all happy that Grimmjow is trying to ruin everything. Not only is he attempting to reverse the injuries that Ukiura gave Ichigo literally 3 minutes ago, but Grimmjow has also freed Ukiura's prisoner, so he's not very happy, and he's not typically happy, but he's extra not happy about this. I've talked a lot about how Ukiura and Grimmjow seem to be the two Espada that have gotten the most focus and the most time on the page. Their characterization is so clearly defined and has been from the beginning, so it's cool to see these very different individuals clash, despite having been on the same team this whole time. You've got the calm, decisive frown of Ukiura against the brash, aggressive grin of Grimmjow. They've been diametrically opposed since Grimmjow's first scene, just two polar opposites. Also, Ukiura's entrance prior to the fight was one of the coldest moments in this series so far. Absolutely terrifying. And while the gap between their rankings isn't as outwardly large as I initially thought, with Grimmjow being 6 and Ukiura being 4, you get the vibe that Grimmjow would not be able to hold out for long in a straight fight, but he thankfully had a trick up his sleeve. It was cool to see these two characters square up, if only for a moment, but I'm glad Ukiura gets sent out of the picture for the time being. I've been itching for another fight between Ichigo and Grimmjow, so the trash man has got to step off and get out of the way of my entertainment for now. Let me have this fight, Ukiura. Thank you. See you eventually. So with Ukiura out of the way, let's get on to the big title fight, and that's exactly what this feels like, a massive title match to finally, hopefully, put an end to this rivalry. We've had 2 fights prior to this between Ichigo and Grimmjow, and it just feels like this is going to be the deciding bout that clinches the belt. I was getting so hyped as it was starting because of all the build-up we've had between these two for so many chapters. Part of what makes a great rivalry is seeing how the 2 opponents affect one another. Grimmjow still bears the scar that Ichigo gave him, the one blow that Ichigo had even been able to land back then. Grimmjow even had the opportunity to have that scar heal just like his arm, but he didn't. He kept it as a reminder, a visual representation of the fight that was never truly finished. Also, I just think this is really sweet and sentimental. And I don't know, it's just cute, Grimmjow. That's cute. Anyway, we're on to round 3 between these two. And their first fight consisted of Ichigo getting absolutely destroyed by Grimmjow besides slashing him once thanks to the power of his hollow side, but that fight got interrupted and Grimmjow was forced to leave. Still, I think that was definitely Grimmjow's victory, and then their second fight was much closer with Ichigo using his hollow mask for the first time, but unfortunately, he still didn't have much control of it, and it didn't last long, but it gave him the edge on Grimmjow when he had it, though Grimmjow never released his Zanpakuto during that fight, and he also was missing an arm, so it wasn't either of them at their best yet either. But this time, they're both going all out and have been through some things since their last fights. The fact that this is the third fight between them adds all of this extra weight. These opponents have real history, and it's history that we've seen firsthand. We've watched the animosity grow from its inception, and that just gives all of this so much more gravitas as they both finally unleash their true powers, including Grimmjow releasing his Zanpakuto and transforming. And guys, I love this transformation. The design is fantastic, and it beautifully builds off his initial design to give us something different, but that still feels so unapologetically Grimmjow. His wild nature has always been emphasized in his look, but this just brings it up to the next level. I absolutely love the animal aspects and how it just makes Grimmjow seem even more untamable and ferocious, and considering that this looks more like how he was before he was an Arankar, which we'll get to in a little bit, it almost feels like he's stripping away all of the things that have domesticated the beast inside, and just letting himself be as pure and fierce as he really is at his core. And there's a lot to kind of strip away because Grimmjow has a lot of layers as a character. He's both simultaneously one of the most primal characters, while also retaining so much of his humanity among the other Espada. He has his own ambitions, he has his own goals, and retained a sense of self, instead of turning into just another drone for what Aizen has planned. And we finally got to learn a little bit about where this Espada came from and what kind of origin made Grimmjow the way he is. We go back into the past and we get to see Grimmjow before he was an Arankar, back when he was in Adhuja, I think is how you pronounce it, the second evolution of a hollow. And this is where he was like a panther roaming Hueco Mundo. And Grimmjow just being a beast just really fits. Like, if I imagine Grimmjow as a hollow, he would absolutely be some sort of cat-like monster, and that's what we get here. And it was just cool getting more detail about the evolution of hollows as a whole. As someone that just adores these creatures and tries to soak up any hollow lore at all, it was fascinating to get a little more insight into their stages and what drives them in those stages. Gillian being made up of hollows until one personality overtakes the other is very disturbing, along with the idea that even after they progress out of being a Gillian, they could revert back to that and lose their individuality again if they don't keep consuming. It's just very existential horror for them, and that's a terrible way to have to exist. But back to Grimmjow, there's something to be said about his size back then and how he was looked down on until he fought and used his strength to be respected. That kind of is the whole core of his character, fighting not only to survive, but also to prove himself to others. And there were definitely others in this brief flashback. It was really cool to see more of the Hollows that eventually were Grimmjow's gang later on, back when he first showed up and came to the living world, and it was cool seeing what they looked like back then. Some of them looked similar to their released forms like Xiaolong and Xyloporo's brother, and then there was D-Roy, looking all big and scary, and then getting taken down first by Grimmjow. I assume the cloth he had over his head as an Arrancar was to cover up the hole that Grimmjow left, and if so, that's an amazing detail for such a minor character. Like, D-Roy did not last long when we first saw him. I wouldn't think there would even be that much thought put into him, but if that's the case, which it seems to be, good job, Kubo. But I really liked the way that Grimmjow earned their respect as they all tried to become more powerful together, to the point that they all believed that he was superior to them, destined to be more than they could ever be. And they even asked him to eat them to help him gain powers, since they just want to contribute to his greater destiny. It's really disturbing, but also just kind of touching. I don't know. It just feels nice. Like, he's got this whole gang and they're all willing to sacrifice so much for him. And it's weird because he does end up carrying out their request. But I guess I'm just a little confused by this whole bit of history though. Did he eat them? Because if he did, how are these the same Hollows that are around as Arrancars later, you know? Did he just bite them? And that was enough to take some of their power. I was hoping there'd be another part of the flashback to help clarify this, like maybe seeing how they went from this gang in the desert to being found by Aizen and turned into Arrancars, but we didn't get that. So I assume he just bit pieces of them, because otherwise it's like straight up impossible for them to be around later if he ate them, right? Like, I'm just missing the connecting piece here, or maybe I just misunderstood the scene and what it took, but it was just a little vague and unclear, and like I said, I would have loved to have seen so much more of this and to have it be expanded on, but I still loved the brief story of the flashback, and especially what it revealed about Grimmjow. These guys even bowed to him, looking at him as some kind of king, and I got serious Lion King vibes in this moment, and it was actually kind of sweet in a way, but it explained even more about our favorite, and only, number 6. Because this is how Grimmjow sees himself from that point forward, motivated by how his gang saw the potential in him, that they were willing to sacrifice themselves for him because they believed in him and his potential. It's no wonder he struggles so much with taking orders and being subservient to Aizen. From Grimmjow's perspective, he was a future king who had any hope of a kingdom usurped by an outsider that treats him like a pawn. He hates being looked down on because he fully believes that he's meant to be at the top of the food chain. It really explains so much about his actions and his headspace throughout this whole arc. And the whole king mindset also reminded me a lot of what the white Zangetsu inside of Ichigo, you know, the hollow side of him, believed about people either being kings or horses. And it's interesting that Grimmjow and Zangetsu seem to share this viewpoint. It's just another similarity between Grimmjow and Ichigo, which is exemplified by the fact that Ichigo is using that power in this battle. He's using his hollow side. So it really is a clash of kings in a way, from, I'm sure, White Zangetsu's viewpoint. And when I say it's a clash, guys, the fight itself is absolutely incredible. You can almost feel the intensity of it coming off the page, and can feel how much they want to defeat each other. With both of them in their heightened states of power, there's a feeling of both giving it their all and trying to maintain their forms longer than the other. It's like a competition of egos. And I do like that Grimmjow acknowledges that Ichigo's mask is lasting longer this time. Like, even in the midst of the fight, he is still respecting Ichigo's growth. It's a small scene, but I loved when the female Espada and her minions are watching the fight. She says that it feels like Grimmjow's opponent can't be human and feels more like a fella Espada. And that's so badass. And I love the feeling of Ichigo being strong enough now where he could easily be mistaken for one of his enemies power-wise. He's come so far, and it warms my heart to see. And the anime adaptation of this fight also really deserves a shout out. Watching it after I read the chapters just really enhanced how full throttle the battle is. The animation was so fluid and really captured the ferocity of both of them. I don't know, it just definitely stood out and really wowed me in a few parts. And I also really liked how they expanded this next part we're about to get into. Because despite Orihime not being a participant in the fight, her presence felt so integral to everything going on. Not only did her healing abilities allow these two warriors to go all out, but her just being around is a reason enough for Ichigo to fight at his hardest. To see her initial belief in him and the reassurance that Ichigo is going to make everything okay was beautiful, and juxtaposed wonderfully with her shift once she saw his hollow mask come on. I really loved her fear of Ichigo's holification and her thoughts on it, because it would be scary to see him this way, especially for Orihime. It's always interesting to me when a character kind of seems to veer toward a precipice or take steps toward a potentially dark and maybe necessary power. It's just interesting to see how their loved ones respond to that, to being on the verge of possibly losing someone they care about, at least as they knew them. In this case, Orihime hardly recognizes him when the mask is on and is terrified that she's going to lose him, just like what happened when her brother became a hollow. It was so effective to harken back to Sora's time as Acid Wire, when he almost completely lost his sense of self behind the mask. It makes perfect sense for her to still be absolutely traumatized by that. She saw what becoming a hollow could do to someone, and now she's seeing something similar happen to Ichigo, as far as she knows. Like, even if Ichigo is in control of himself, he's still different. At first, it's hard for her to recognize him anymore. But thanks to Nell and her own support for Ichigo, Orihime breaks through her fear and supports the man that came to help her, whether he has a mask on or not. I loved that her cheer gave him the encouragement he needed to, really strike at Grimmjow. It's like someone like Ichigo, who's so focused on protecting his friends, gets physically stronger when he has them backing him, when he remembers what he's fighting for. And it was just such a badass moment when he told Grimmjow that he won't let himself get hurt anymore because Orihime is telling him not to, and it led perfectly to the real climax of the fight. Throughout the battle, Grimmjow taunts Ichigo about their rivalry, asking him about why he really came to Wako Mundo, saying that it wasn't about saving his friend. No, Grimmjow believed Ichigo just loved to fight, and he had that lust for battle, and he wanted nothing more than to fight him in particular. And at first, Ichigo says he's wrong, but as the fight wears on, it's looking more like that was, possibly the case. It's more personal than it being just about a Soul Reaper versus a Hollow. And as it turns out, while Ichigo may wrestle with the hollow side of himself that loves the thrill of the fight, he still is in control, and he has reasons of his own to fight Grimmjow that Grimmjow can't understand. Yes, he came to fight him, but he didn't want to do it solely for the sake of proving that he was better. He did it because he needs to cut down anyone that poses a threat to the people that he loves. It was such a powerful moment that just builds on everything we've learned about our hero throughout the whole series. Grimmjow fights for himself and only himself. Ichigo fights for others, and it's that massive difference between them that gives Ichigo the edge at the end. He has reasons beyond himself to win. And with that, we have our winner of the third round of their duel, just barely managing to overcome Grimmjow. But I really love the little moment of Ichigo not letting Grimmjow fall after he's beaten. Despite how tense their rivalry is, there really is respect there beneath all of it, and humanity that divides Ichigo from these Espada. Like, sure, he's sort of not listening to Dordogn's advice about not showing any mercy, but I like that he's not completely giving in. Will he probably have to give up his compassion a bit? Yeah, probably. That's definitely what's being set up. At the very least, it's probably going to cause an issue down the road. But just when it seems like the fight's over and it seems like we can take a breath, Grimmjow has a Carl from Die Hard moment and gets back up, even when he's so clearly defeated. And it's a beautiful moment when Ichigo throws his own sword away to show Grimmjow that the fight really is over. And I also love him trying to convince Grimmjow to just give up for now, and they can fight again another day. He just doesn't want to kill Grimmjow. And then someone else might have just done it anyway. If any other Espada were going to put a real end to the fight, it would be easy to assume that it would be Yukiura, considering what happened earlier, but no. Neutra shows up to stake his claim at fighting Ichigo. This is the second time this guy has shown up after a fight to, he's just waiting around, waiting to pick off who's ever left. It's annoying. But it does look like we'll finally get to see him in action some more. And now we can gauge his strength depending on how this fight with Ichigo goes. We'll see if he really is the strongest Espada like he claimed. I really doubt it, personally. But my big question is this the end of Grimmjow? Did he die here? I think there'd be more of a big deal, or maybe that's gonna come later, but I hope not. One thing these chapters really solidified is that Grimmjow is a great character, and one that I could honestly see being a fun occasional ally, even if it's a strained kind of truce. Hell, I would love for him to have a role to play in defeating Aizen. That would be really nice, considering how he's been controlled and abused by him throughout the whole arc. I just hope he sticks around in some capacity, but we'll have to wait and see. Just don't die, man. That's all I ask. But for now, Ichigo is up against another Espada after getting beaten by one and just barely managing to beat another. So let's see how that goes. It seems to be like Espada after Espada after Espada for our boy, but this victory against Grimmjow was an extremely satisfying one to see. And that's it for these chapters, guys. What a fight. What a rivalry. What great characters. So join me next time, where hopefully Ichigo is just going to mop the floor with Neutra. But I hope you all have a great day. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys all next time.